Hey, somebody needs to cook the sushi. You have? Excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to The Professional Noticer. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me a part of your week. My purpose here today and with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or a coach. I want to help you live the life of your wildest dreams by giving you access to the greatest mentors the world has to offer today. This week, The Professional Noticer is sponsored by Books for Veterans. The Veterans Administration in Washington, D.C. has asked for 10,000 Andy Andrews books. I'm personally donating as many as I can, but to reach 10,000, I need your help. What we're able to do to make that easier for you is for every $12 donation you make, a hardback book will be sent to the VA for veterans, their families, and for the employees of the Veterans Administrations. That $12 will cover the cost of the book, the shipping and handling, or you can purchase one of these awesome Books for Veterans t-shirts, and your purchase will include a book sent in your name. So whether you can make this a personal gift or a corporate donation, just go to andyandrews.com/veterans. This can be added to a website purchase done as an individual entry or in conjunction with a Books for Veterans t-shirt. Thanks very much for your support. Observations and answers, that's what we do here on The Professional Noticer. And as you know, we love it when somebody comes to the table with both. When we get somebody that has observation and answers, that's just a double whammy. And we've got it today. We have Gregg Hurwitz. He's the New York Times #1 internationally best-selling author of 24 thrillers. I've read a bunch of them, but I don't know that I've read all 24. I'm going to have to get the list out. But he is the author of the Orphan X series. That's probably his #1 claim to fame. His novels have won tons of literary awards. He's been published in 33 languages, and he writes screenplays and scripts for television. He's written comics for DC and Marvel. He's written for the Wall Street Journal and The Guardian. He's written poetry. He's done just about everything you can do. So please welcome Gregg Hurwitz. Hey, Gregg, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Man, I am so glad you're here. You have a brand new book coming out that a lot of us are very excited about. It's called Lone Wolf, and it's #9 in the series of the Orphan X grouping. So tell me, now, as I understand it, I haven't read the book yet, but as I understand it, this thing has a lot to do with what's going on right now with the AI stuff. And your hero, Evan Smoak, gets caught between two technocrat billionaires. And so what's going on with this one?
Well, Orphan X is a former government assassin. That was his code name. He was taken out of a foster home at the age of 12. And trained up basically to go places the U.S. is not allowed to go and to kill people they're not allowed to kill. And so he's raised completely in a silo on his own. But his handler and father figure when he was young told him the hard part won't be making you a killer. The hard part is keeping you human. And so by the time we catch up to him, he's kind of fled the program and he has an encrypted phone number, which is 1-855 to nowhere, which you can call and you can see if he answers. And basically he helps people who are in desperate shape with nowhere else to turn. So in Lone Wolf, the new book, and you can pick up the series at any one of these books, he picks up the phone and it's the most ridiculous small case that he's ever encountered. There's a young woman, a little girl at the other end of the phone who's lost her dog. So it's like this great insult to this world-renowned assassin that he's in pursuit of this ridiculous mutt who he's tracking down for this girl. And sure enough, he finds himself in the middle of an enormous clash of power and influence. He kind of stumbles firsthand into a murder. And as you said, the stakes mount until we see that kind of one of the biggest things that he's up against is one of these giant like a genius billionaire, narcissistic, perhaps psychopathic, tech geniuses who are playing around with AI and the different things that it can do. So he finds himself embroiled from the smallest little ridiculous case in this giant Clash of the Titans about the future of humanity.
You know, what does What does AI have to do with the future of humanity? What are you thinking? Because obviously, to get involved in this story, you got to know a lot more about AI than I do, and it some of it seems exciting, but some of it seems just kind of creepy and scary to me.
Yeah. Well,
Where's this going, do you think?
what's funny is, so I researched my books a long time before they come out. So I
Right.
started dealing with this and diving into it. Gosh, it must have been 2.5 years ago now when I really was starting to collect stuff. One of my close friends is a big chip designer. His name's Jim Keller, and he built the fastest computer chip in history, once for Steve Jobs. He was a CTO he's done it 3 times. So I've been talking to these subject matter experts who are just, spectacularly brilliant and really on the forefront of it, thinking about what the capabilities are. And the way I see it, what AI can provide is a really bespoke experience for your whole world. I mean, one of the things Jim told me was that at the push of a button, you could have it produce a Faulkner novel, a brand new Faulkner novel if you want, or an F. Scott Fitzgerald novel. And then you could say, well, why don't you dial it down to an IQ of 111, because that's my IQ. So make sure the vocab matches that. Well, why don't we make sure it's not too violent? Why don't we do it half the length? So we have this influx now of being able to play and manipulate the world in a way that what we're receiving is sort of entertainment. It can be applied to news that only applies and is targeted to us. And on the one hand, that can sound wonderful, but on the other hand, it sort of is a nightmare because, it's very interesting. I have a number of friends. I've done some ventures lately into when I've been looking at the philosophy of AI. I talked to some friends who are theologians. And in a way, what this sort of atomized AI symbolizes, it's a lot like the evangelical description of hell, where people are removed from God, they're removed from a shared overarching narrative, and they're removed from each other at the same time. And so we're sort of hastening this embrace of technology where we're floating around like in the movie WALL-E, where we're in our own little pods, and it's feeding us all this stuff that's only for us. But if we pick our heads up beyond the little world that we've spun around us, we're isolated from an overarching narrative and from each other.
It's an odd thing to me to be faced with a technology that is, I guess, growing faster than our understanding of it. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think so. It's accelerating rapidly. And I think what's really important is, how are we going to use it? I mean, there's been past the Industrial Revolution, right? We've had cars that have come. We've had, first it was the internet, then it's phones, right? We went from a phone the size of a room or a computer the size of a room to one that fits in our pocket that has more technology than what spurred the space shuttle for the first moon landing. What's very important is that we have a relationship, I think, with technology where it's in its proper place. So, we want to be Sorcerer Mickey Mouse. We don't want to be the eyeless brooms hauling the buckets of water in Fantasia, right? So you have to make sure
way of putting it.
that our relationship to it is, if this is a tool that could be amazing in terms of, helping deal with environmental shifts. It could be amazing in terms of advances in health. There's a lot of ways it could be used properly if it's in its proper place within a hierarchy. But if we lose our relationship to that, we lose our relationship to reality. And so it's a lot of what I was playing with within the context of this book and this series.
Personally, have you messed with the AI and have you put anything in like in the style of Gregg Hurwitz, do so and so? Have you done any of that?
I haven't done as much, but a couple of friends of mine have. I'm pleased to report that it is still a fairly robotic rendering of my voice. Though what's interesting is it makes there's some other places where it's better. It's good. It's good for like writing ad copy, like stuff that's a little bit more rote.
Right.
But it still can't remotely simulate. I asked at one point for it to have a dialogue exchange in the voice of Orphan X, and it came out pretty stiff. So that was good. Score 1 for the humans.
Yeah, I've been curious to just try to just kind of come up with some kind of odd things that have that would spur it. Like I put in sometime recently, have Bear Bryant coach Taylor Swift on the release of her new album, and just having those talk, it fascinates me to see what it does. But I'm anxious to read Lone Wolf and see what you're finding there. You know your research seems to me to be very wide ranging, which is, I guess, probably why you've been able to land on topics as they're occurring. And one of the things that I read about you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you have gotten some undercover research, specifically into cults. That when I say undercover research in cults, I want to say, Gregg, tell me about this. I mean, that sounds as good as one of your books.
Well, one of the things I like to do is it's very important for me to give the reader a front row seat to the action. And so every weapon that Orphan X shoots, I've been on. I've been on custom 1911s. I've shot, semi-automatics, assault shotguns. So I really go out in the field. I've snuck onto demolition ranges with SEALs and blown up cars. I try and do a lot of it so that when I describe it, the reader feels like they're right there. And that has to do with a lot of other things in the books. It's not all about action. But for my fifth novel dealt with mind control cults. And so after I did a lot of the research, I went undercover into cults to see how they function. It's absolutely fascinating how they work, the methods of persuasion, what they look for. It's different than a lot of people think. They're actually looking for people who are relatively normal and relatively healthy. We have a stereotype that they seek out people kind of on the outskirts of society. But what they really want are people who will react predictably to social circumstances. So they want people who are normal. It's much in the way that if you think about a magician who's on stage, if they invite someone up to be a magician's assistant from the crowd, they don't want to pick the schizophrenic because that person won't hew to the sleight of hand in a predictable way, right? They want to pick somebody who looks ordinary. And so when you're joining a cult or when you're involved in a cult, they want to make sure that they can manipulate you, that you'll act in the way that a kind of good, healthy, stable person reacts. To give an example, and I've given some lectures about this in social psychology courses. I gave a talk at UCLA one time, and midway through my talk, I just froze and I stared like this at the back of the classroom. And everybody in the auditorium turned and looked behind them. And I said, right, that's a very normal, healthy reaction, right? By pausing abruptly and looking behind you, I've indicated that there's a threat or an opportunity that's introduced. And so you should orient your eye towards it. Cults and getting people involved in cults is like that. There's just 1,000 small steps like this that you can just move somebody into a different awareness of reality. It's like you take their environment and twist it 15% and just take them right off course.
That's interesting. It's like a lot of stage hypnosis. I used to think for a long time, I thought when I watched some of those guys, I thought, I could do that. I could go to a college and put a picture up of me that a hypnotist was coming, and, you got 1,000 kids there and you stand them all up, and then you make a few suggestions, sitting them down, you knock them down to 10, come up on stage, and these 10 will do everything you want them to do. So it is odd to see the little triggers that can be pulled there, but it's interesting when you think of that being done in a cult. But I guess why not?
Some of the rules that cults follow. It's very interesting. So one of them is, for instance, privacy deprivation. Like anywhere that you go, there's somebody else. They don't want you to have a lot of time by yourself to reconnect with your prior identity, right? And we do this now ourselves. We do it with our phones. We take these phones with us everywhere, right? So we're always with a phone that's feeding us algorithms based on what we viewed. Most of the algorithms, whether it's a news channel or social media, are really primed with deep machine learning algorithms behind them to make us the most outraged or upset to keep us stuck in the phone. They'll do anything to hold our interest. And so one of the other things that they do in mind control cults is they want to limit your access to outside people or information. Well, that's another things that we're doing through some of these algorithms that are chosen with our news sources, right? And if people offend us, if we're on social media, we can just unfriend them. So those sort of little worlds that we're discussing earlier about, like from the movie Wall-E, that we're in a little world of our own making. We're being fed information that we self-select that goes with us everywhere all the time, just like privacy deprivation and just like selection. So I don't think that people can actually maintain their sanity while being on social media or in the news online for a significant amount of time. I think we're really being skewed behaviorally in ways that we don't even comprehend. And a lot of what I'm writing about in the Orphan X series, in this thriller series, is the value of the rugged individual, the value of somebody who holds his moral compass, who has a code of right or wrong, who's not on the radar everywhere, right? He's not hooked in and on the grid and subject to all of this. He's like sort of an old-fashioned hero who is there for when that phone rings. And on the other end is somebody who's been terrorized by another human or group of humans, and he'll go to any lengths to protect them. It's sort of the opposite of this sterilized world of ones and zeros that are sort of massaging us through comfort and convenience and luxury.
Very interesting. You've written 24 thrillers, and this is number 9 of Orphan X. And so at what point, and I'm assuming, is this the only series that you have?
I had a series earlier in my career of 4 books, and I have a young adult series of 2 books, but this is by far the longest one, this Orphan X series.
So I am curious, you're writing the book and you're doing another one and you're doing one and then you do another sequel to that and then another one, but then something captures you with Evan Smoak and you go, I got to keep this guy going. I mean, because obviously we are so interested in it because you are so interested in
That's
it.
right.
And you have managed to spread your research into things that are reality to us. And as odd as it may seem to have a guy out there on the fringe of society with a cell phone, it has enough reality that we get it, we like it. And so at what point in your writing did you go, I got to do this again, and I got to do it again? At what point did you fall in love with this character?
You put your finger on something, Andy, when you said, if I'm bored writing the book, everyone's going to be bored reading it. Like, my interest when I'm writing has everything to do with how it's coming off on the page. And fortunately, I have a career, I really have a life that I get to go explore the things that are the most interesting to me. It's probably like you with this podcast. I get to just go in any dark corner of the world that fascinates me. I get to go there and shine a light in it and go explore it. And with Evan Smoak, here's this character. I describe him, I say he's average size, average build, just a normal guy, not too good looking. He's very much an everyman. He's not like Jack Reacher that he's the biggest guy. He's not like James Bond that he's the suavest guy. But the totality of who he is and his sort of inherent moral code are the things that carry him forward. And it took me 16 books to finally find somebody who's a character that I could live with year after year. And the stories just keep coming to me. And he changes a lot across the course of the series. There's a sort of an uber story. As much as you can get any book on its own, every book stands on its own. That you can read it and you can pick it up where it is. But there's also a larger story of his emergence into becoming more human because of how he was raised. I say he never learned to speak the strange language of human intimacy. So he's sort of outside society and he's got his face up to the glass and he's looking in at all these people leading ordinary lives that he can never have for himself. But what he can do is to be a wolf that hunts other wolves that are threatening that, so he can preserve those lives for other people. And there's something in his exchange and bearing that I just haven't been able to let go of. And if you think about it, I spend more waking hours with Evan Smoak than I do with my wife and kids.
Yeah. So where did Smoak come from?
You want to know a secret?
Yeah.
I take most of the names for my main characters from two different communities. One of them are spec ops guys, like operators they just have unimprovable names, Navy
Right.
SEALs, Green Berets. I've used a lot of their names for whatever reason. Those guys just have it squared. In the other place, I take a lot of names from our baseball players.
Do you?
So I've always thought, it's like if you name your son Buster Posey, you've pretty much sealed his vocational fate. Like there's no way he's not going to be a major league catcher. And there was a player called Justin Smoak who spells his name Smoak, because I didn't, Evan Smoak, if it's spelled Smoke, it's a little bit cheesy, right?
Right.
But to have the name that's offset. So I'm always watching baseball guys and talking to my friends who are in the special operations community.
Do you have any what do you call it, inside jokes that run through your books? That's like just for your friends and family?
Well, there's a lot of names that appear. I have brutally murdered and tortured a whole number of people from my community. Sometimes as a show of affection,
Yeah.
and sometimes for revenge. I had one teacher who wasn't particularly nice to me, so I made him a police officer pedophile who gets shot by Orphan X in the first book in the series. But a lot of times it'll be just friends. They'll say, "Oh, I want to be in a book," and I think, "Are you sure? I might have you put through a meat grinder. You don't know what you're asking for here."
Right. Wow. Who's the guy, Matt, who wrote This Present Darkness? Do you remember that book years ago? Shoot. That guy, who was it? Frank Paretti.
Oh.
And so Frank Paretti was writing another book, and a publisher, I know Frank and I know this publisher, and the publisher was giving him some grief about his deadlines, and so Frank turned in some pages that had this publisher's name, and he was killed with an axe. And so he said, "Okay, take your time. Take your time.
Take another month." Yeah.
Yeah. I was curious just about the inside jokes, because I write, and when I have to do a name or a number, I kind of same thing. Why not put somebody in I know? And my wife will look at numbers and go, "Okay, what's that got to do?" I had one book where somebody lived at 2210 Fordyce Road. And she said, "Okay, so why 2210? And I said, "Well, Fordyce Road is where Bear Bryant was born in Fordyce, Arkansas. And 22 and 10 are my two favorite Alabama football players of all time, Johnny Musso and Stedman Shealy." And she goes, "Okay." But that's why I just wonder, when I see things and names in books like yours, I wonder, okay, these guys doing the same thing.
It always makes me laugh too. You know how sometimes you go to a movie and it says, inspired by real life events. And I always think, of course it is. Like, how could something not be inspired by real life events? Like, what would it be inspired by exactly? So of course there's all these pieces of us that find expression on the page.
I got an odd question for you. I know that that writing to be read and writing to speak is two different things. It's two different styles. And so I've never written screenplays or anything like that. And so I'm curious, you've done that. What is the difference in writing for a book and writing for a screenplay? And is it similar to writing for reading and writing for speaking?
It's a little bit different, but they inform each other. With a novel, what you have is 400 pages of final product. A screenplay is more like a recipe, right? It's an invitation to collaborate. Okay. It's a roadmap. And so you have 110 pages with lots of white on the page. So to make it readable is very different. You can't have internal dialogue, right? It's part of the reason why people don't always love voiceover in movies. You want to capture things that can be seen and can be heard, right? Only, not things that are internal. And so there's limitations. there's a lot less room in that 110 pages. And so every scene has to count. Every scene has to forward both plot and character. So there's a lot of lessons that can apply back and forth between the two. And so there's a certain leanness of prose and a gallop of the pacing that I'm always spurred to keep moving in a novel. But then novels give a real sort of depth of characterization, which I always try and bring to the screenwriting, so they can inform each other. They're different muscles, or let's say they're different events in the decathlon, but it sure helps to be in shape overall.
Right. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. That's a great way of putting it. If we push aside the Orphan X novels, of what you have left, what is your favorite? Which one is you? Do you look at, maybe it didn't sell the most? Maybe you look and go, "Godly, this is the best I can do. I wish somebody would read this."
It's so hard to say. It's a lot like trying to choose between your kids, right? Or when your kids bring you different paintings they've done and ask you to rank them. I mean, they all hold down some key part of my life. I'll say, in some ways, two of the most personal books I wrote, one's called The Crime Writer and one's called You're Next. There's a book I wrote called The Survivor that's very close to my heart. So, but they all have these different kind of eras and moments, right? It's a lot of these, they're a year of my life and sometimes more.
Sure.
And they all have different things. I mean, I think I could rank some of them roughly on good to bad. There's certainly stuff. My first book was called The Tower. I wrote it I wrote parts of it when I was 19. I was an undergrad. And there's some parts I might look back on and cringe about because I was a kid, so I think that some of it varies, but they're all special. They all have something that I felt compelled to want to write about and talk about.
Give me 3 books that you just love. 3 books you didn't write them, but there are 3 books that you think about occasionally because you just love them. 3 of your favorites.
Favorite book. There's 4. I'll give you 4. How about that?
Okay.
4 perfect novels. One is The Great Gatsby. I read it every few years. It means something different to me every time I read it.
Right.
I love Faulkner's The Sound and the Fury. I think it's just a perfect book. There's a book by a writer called Tim O'Brien. I don't know if you know Tim O'Brien. He's a Vietnam vet. He won the National Book Award. And it's a short story collection called The Things They Carried. And I'll tell you, Andy, there's not one word that's chosen wrong in that entire collection of short stories. It's just spectacular. It's called The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. And then as pertains to crime fiction, my favorite book by kind of a long shot is Red Dragon by Thomas Harris. It's the book that preceded The Silence of the Lambs, and it's a perfect thriller. I think it's just flawless.
Tim O'Brien. I'm writing that down. I'll be getting that this afternoon. So, what can we do to help you?
Well, if you like reading books, please pick up Lone Wolf. It's the new Orphan X book. I'm going out on tour too. So if you're, let me think, where am I going? I'm going to be in the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm in LA, Scottsdale, Houston, St. Louis, Savannah. So I'll be out and around a little bit around the country. And if you like signed first editions for yourself or for a gift for somebody, you can call some of these stops along the way for me are really great independent bookstores that specialize in crime fiction and thrillers. And so I could sign anything and have it mailed to you. You can catch up to me at my website. It's gregghurwitz.net. I got an extra G on the end of my first name just to make sure everyone misspells it for the rest of my life. Or come by. I'm on the different social media platforms too. You can come by and say hello there. But I love hearing from readers. I love seeing people on the road and hearing from them on social media. So,
we will list all your, every way that somebody can get you on your show notes. But I would urge everybody, with you about to go out with this book, check the calendar on gregghurwitz.net and meet him there. Go say hello. And get a couple of books, because you're gonna love this, and you're gonna want to keep one. You're gonna think of at least a couple of people you want to give it to. So, anytime you can get a signed first edition, I mean, you need to be buying for Christmas right now. So this would be good. Gregg, thank you for being with us. I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, it's nice talking to you, Andy. I hope to get back to Alabama soon too.
Well, if you do, look us up. We got some great places down here, some cool independent bookstores, and we love you here. So stop and say hello.
I will do. Take care.
All right. Thank you, buddy. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. And I think that'll do it for this week. Get us out of here, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing that tiny bit of mental energy I have for you, seeking wisdom, making observations, and endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, goodbye. This episode of The Professional Noticer was produced by Matt Limpert. The Noticer theme written and performed by Sugarcane Jane. Flavored Q-tips for the cast and crew provided by Twinkle and Smoak of Beverly Hills. Additional financial consideration provided by Simplicity.com. Friend, is life overwhelming you at the moment? Is stress your closest companion? Do your days and weeks become ever more complicated? Now there's an online family that will help declutter your life and provide a template for an existence of effortless ease. Introducing Simplicity.com. Originally founded in the 1930s by poor people, the concept today remains much the same, except for the fact that we have a website. On Simplicity.com, you'll connect with others who share your lifestyle and values. Our dress code for members of Simplicity.com is gender neutral. Jeans, t-shirts, and tennis shoes for everyone. We exercise, and our recommendations for that is walking. For entertainment, we read. And at mealtimes, Simplicity.com urges a strict diet of rice and water for all meals. Join today, and when you do, immediately get rid of your computer. That's Simplicity.com.